Welcome to Raise the Anchor with host Melissa Burbridge. In this podcast, I will share the stories of individuals who have made major life-changing decisions. The purpose of this podcast is to tell their stories and inspire change within. Stick around and share their journey with me. So today on the podcast, we have somebody joining us from England. His name is Dean Fox. He's a mindset coach and motivational speaker. He definitely has a way of getting you to tweak your mindset to be more active instead of inactive. Welcome to the podcast, Dean.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome.
Yes. No, it's really good. And any chance I get to hopefully add some value to some people is a great opportunity. So I'm always grateful for that.
Well, definitely right now, a lot of people need a mindset shift with everything going on in the world. So I'm very excited to have you here. Before you helped us unlock our potential, what did you do?
So my original background was in engineering. I worked in the steel industry here in the UK, in different parts of the UK for a number of years. And I progressed through to being a senior engineer on a team of other materials engineers supporting the commercial division in contract development and on some major projects around the world. And but I've always, when I look back now, I talk about people who have this when-then mentality, this kind of finish line mentality, and I definitely had that. I was always looking for the next step, the next progression, the next best thing. And I didn't realize why at the time. But that's certainly where my focus was always on kind of developing to the next level. And so I saw an opportunity to move from direct engineering, technical engineering, into the commercial field, so sales and business development, as being my next step, the journey to where I wanted to be. And so I moved in.
You have to have a certain mindset to be an engineer, so that must have been a shift in itself.
Yeah, I think that. My engineering background came more from I always wanted to understand why things worked the way they worked, and that's kind of where my engineering background came from. The shift into sales was I also realized that even during my time as an engineer that I thoroughly enjoyed working alongside people, so building a relationship and getting to know people, and that was been the foundation of my sales and business development career. And so I didn't see them as being too far a jump, and actually those people who employed me saw it as a real advantage to have someone with a technical engineering background and a commercial attitude.
No, definitely. So you started dabbling in the entrepreneur world after reading a book. What book was that, and how did it really shift your mindset?
So the first book that I read that really kind of pointed me in that direction was Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And I think the thing in there that really kind of shifted for me was this explanation about employees versus investors versus business owners and entrepreneurs. And I suddenly saw for the first time that, oh, wait a minute, there might be a different path here. There might not just be one. I was kind of conditioned that there is only one route to the top, and that was you work your way through a corporate career and you reach the very top that you can. But I always felt like there must be more to life than this. And that was the first book that kind of opened my eyes to that there is something different. There's another route, another path. And so that I started to explore that in more detail then in terms of what could that mean for me and how could I take advantage of the information I was learning at the time.
Yeah. So I know you were doing some property management or like some property work.
Yeah.
And then 2008 happened. Like what exactly happened then?
So we had a period I talk about often in my life between 2008 and kind of the end of 2010. And we had 3 or 4 things that happened in quick succession, relatively speaking. So in 2008, under the financial crisis that beset the world at the time, the global crisis, our our property business, our real estate business, effectively ended almost overnight. We had a growing business. We were multi six figures, almost seven figures at the time, and it just almost overnight, people, all of the strategies that we had changed. We were no longer available to us, and on top of that, we effectively worked alongside a number of financial institutes to support our growth and investments, and all of those retracted immediately, and that caused us some real stress and pressure, not just around the business, but also around the financial aspects around our own life in terms of how we were going to get through that. And so over the course of 2008 and 2009, I think we'd kind of hoped that things would pick up again and we would find a resolution. We'd done all right up till then. So probably about the first 12 months, it wasn't there was a concern, but we weren't massively stressed. We had funds behind us that would allow us to survive. It was as we started to progress into 2009 and towards the end of that year, we started to think about, right, okay, where are we going to go? What's our next step? What's the strategy going to be? How do we foresee a way forward? And so I kind of made a decision that, right, well, it's difficult, but it's not insurmountable. The market will change. Things will move forward. We just need to survive through the period of difficulty. And the decision we made was that I would go back into the corporate world and get a job. I had enough skills and knowledge and contacts, I felt, to be able to do that fairly quickly. And that would see us through. We'd survive on that basis until we could find a new strategy. That all changed in March 2010. So in the process of kind of making those decisions and saying, right, I'm going to start to reach out, my wife, myself, and my youngest son at the time were involved in a really bad road traffic accident, car accident. And it meant that, the accident involved 5 or 6 vehicles. They closed the road for 5 hours. My youngest son was airlifted to hospital. First responders, as you would call them, not on the scene. They often afterwards when we spoke to them had said that they didn't think anyone had survived in the vehicle that we were in. And what that meant was that we were unable then, or I was unable to go back to work. My wife also was unable to. And there was a further period of about the best part of maybe 10 to 12 months where we wouldn't be in a position to be able to physically go back to do something else. And the ultimate kind of effect of that, from me personally, was I suffered probably what was the darkest time of my life. I really, really struggled from a mindset point of view, from a mental health point of view. Became really depressed. Found it really difficult for lots of reasons, I think. But I talk about this often now because I think that as men, lots of people don't want to talk about it. There's this attitude of everything should be okay. We should, in the UK perspective, we should have a stiff upper lip and we should just get on with it.
You're supposed to be the rock. You're supposed to be the strong one.
Yeah. And so, I really struggled with that idea that I wasn't the rock, the strong one. I was kind of breaking down and how was I going to support my wife and my family and everything else around me? And that got progressively worse over the course of that year. I was really, really struggling by December of 2010. And I think that the reason December it became so difficult then was that we were about 2 weeks away from the Christmas period. You've got young family. It's like, well, not only do I need to provide for them in this difficult time, it just became really, really difficult. And I got to a point where I didn't think I could continue. And I openly tell the story that one of the mornings in December, I got up and I said to my wife, Christine, that I needed to go out and get some air. I needed to clear my head and think about, where we could go, what we could do next. And the truth was that wasn't really why I was going out. I had no intention of coming home that day. I went to some woodland near where we lived, and my plan was that I would end my life that day, and I didn't. And look, at the time, I couldn't tell you why. There were some things I experienced, but I couldn't tell you why I experienced them, or I couldn't explain them. I probably can now more so, but I'd gone to this area, I sat quietly, and I kind of made this decision finally that the world and my family would be better off without me. What happened was when I made that decision, I felt the most at peace I've ever felt. I didn't have any stress, I didn't have any worries, I didn't have any concern. It was almost as if everything just kind of fell away. And it gave me almost, I suppose, I don't know how long it lasted, but a moment in time of real clarity to ask myself some questions. And some of those questions included, well, before we make this decision, take the action, best part of 9 months ago, you could have died in a car accident. And you didn't. And everyone said you should have done. So why? That to me tells me that there's a bigger purpose. There's a reason why I experienced all of those things, and I'm still experiencing. And I don't know what that is, but maybe I should try and find out. And that period of time was enough for me to return home. It brought me back to say, well, I'm gonna try and find out what that is. I need to know more about why I'm here and why I'm going through all of these things, why I'm being affected by all these things. And that really was what started my journey into what I now know as personal development. I didn't know that's what it was called at the time, but trying to understand. And I suppose that's where my engineering background came to the fore again, was, well, why do I feel like this? And why does that affect me? And why do people feel like this? And why do I take those actions? Kind of led me to my research and investigation into those aspects.
No, and we're happy you did, because you definitely motivate us. I didn't know much about you before, but as I've been researching you and watching how, like, you just put up this post, and it just makes me think, okay, what should I shift today? How can I shift to work towards my goals today? So I definitely say we're happy that you changed your mind and decided I must be here for a purpose. So now,
yeah, thank you. And I truly believe that with everybody, that there's a purpose for everything. Everything happens in my view now for a specific reason. It's really difficult sometimes, I understand, to see when it's happening, but what is the reason for this? But you can never join the dots looking forward. But later on, you'll look back and all of that will make sense at some point.
Yeah, that must have been a really dark time. What was during all of that time? You're not able to work. You're possibly going to lose your house. You've been in a car accident where you could have died. What actually motivated you and your wife to kind of keep going every day until you reached that point?
Yeah, I think that like I shared earlier, I think that one of the things I've realized, I didn't really know it at the time, but one of the key things that I think is inbuilt in us all, we just don't see it sometimes, is this kind of inherent resilience that we have. And because my wife was going through it with me, but because of my family, I just kept looking at, well, I have to be able to support them. They're gonna grow up. I want them to grow up knowing that we did everything we possibly could, not only to make their life better, but to be an example to them. And that, for me, that was probably the biggest thing. I was motivated every day to be able for them to be able to say, yeah, I can see, the things that you did were a great example for me in my life. And I never ever wanted them at any point in their life, regardless of what they're doing. I always talked about, the only way to fail is to quit. Yeah. And if you keep going, then you'll find what it is you're supposed to be doing. You'll find a way to do what it is that you need to do. So I think for me, that was what drove me every single day. But it was a real tough struggle. It was a daily battle during that time, especially towards the end of 2010.
Well, I do agree with you saying that men have a harder time admitting that they're having a hard time. So I think it's incredibly inspirational that you even talk about that. Do you push other men to kind of come to that point?
Yeah, I mean, I regularly talk about it, and when I share my story, I often say I don't say this because that it is more geared towards men, or that men have got different problems, but there's definitely this idea that we are not supposed to talk about these things, and we are not supposed to kind of be in that position and share it. And I share it openly because I think that too many people think that it's a weakness. Whereas I probably did at the time think the same, but I definitely now view it as a strength. If you take any aspect of sport or business or anything like that, if there's an area of that, if you're a professional sports person, an athlete, and there's an area of your game or whatever sport you're involved in that you want to improve in, or you're struggling with, the first thing you do is reach out to somebody who can help you develop and improve that part of your game, or that part of your business even. And yet, it's seen as a weakness in the general scheme of things, that we should reach out to somebody to ask for help around something that we're struggling with. So I actively, push people to do that on a daily basis. That it isn't a weakness; it's a sign of strength for somebody to say, "Okay, I need some support with this right now." And I use that as an example. All of the top sports people in the world have got coaches, but in my view, all of the top business people in the world have got coaches. It's only like further down the scale that people think that they don't need them, or they sign a weakness to have somebody supporting you. Everyone else sees it as a huge plus, a huge benefit. So yeah, I definitely advocate people kind of reaching out, even if it's just professional help is fantastic, but even if it's just to talk to somebody to say, look, things are not okay right now. I need to start having a conversation about what I think right now, what I feel, and where that's taking me at the moment.
No, it's definitely true. It's definitely true. A lot of people don't realize that they should reach out for help or get that coaching. Nobody's made it to the top without having some advice somewhere down the road.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So you do have a knack for sharing motivational quotes that help shift people's mindset. Who helps shift your mindset?
So again, I talk a lot about the fact that people, we constantly need to be improving. We need people to support us. So I have my own mentors and coaches, some who are retained by me. In other words, I pay them to support me, but others are just mentors, people that kind of I listen to or I look up to, or I met at events or been to events and seen speak. And I take I'm a big believer in there isn't only one way for anything. So I listen to a wide variety of people from different backgrounds. I have a very open mind about things, but I'll take elements from all sorts of people and think that's a real fit for the way I'm looking to do this, or the way I'm looking to share this. And so I'll take bits and pieces from everybody and then kind of put my spin on it as well. But I have a whole range of people. I've been to events with people like Bob Proctor, Brendan Bouchard, Les Brown, all the great kind of Tony Robbins, kind of all of the people that are really kind of out there right now. But also some that lots of people maybe not have come across. So Rupert Spira, Sri Muji. So there's a few other people that people haven't come across that are still people that I would class as my mentors and the people that motivate and inspire me, as well as kind of my coaches who I meet on a regular basis with, who are retained to kind of help me continually see things the way that I need to.
So since you've changed and this is, you help shift people's mindsets, has there been a client or an event or a moment that has made you realize that, yes, this is what I'm meant to do?
I don't think there's ever been just one, but what I say is that every time someone asked me the other day what inspires me, and I'm inspired by people who are ready to take control, so take some action in order to live their best life. Anybody for me who's made a conscious decision that I'm I'm going to be the best version of me. It inspires me. And every time I work with somebody, whether it's I'm retained by them as a coach to support them specifically, or I get asked to talk at an event, every time somebody comes to me and says, that resonated with me, thank you for sharing that. That's what inspires me. It's not one single event. It's every time it happens, I'm reminded that I have an opportunity to share my own story, my journey, and the things that I've learned with other people that can have an impact on their journey in the same way that those people on my journey have shared with me. And that ripple effect, that's kind of what continually inspires me every day, that we can reach more and more people.
And your wife is pretty inspirational too, helping with the educational. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, and my wife has two aspects. When people talk about, is it, when you said earlier, is it one client? Probably not, but my wife inspires me hugely. We did some work together in the early stages. My wife discovered that she was dyslexic. She didn't discover it until she was 48. But less than 3 years later, she was a published author. She wrote a children's book to help inspire other children who might be feeling the way she felt when she was at school, having suffered from dyslexia. And she went on to run educational workshops around that. She's done them all over the world, in fact, in the US, in the Middle East, and in the UK. And she also now runs a women's networking group, a global empowerment group for women around things like the law of attraction and those aspects, about how they can use those to help transform their lives in the way she has.
So what led you to start the Infinite Wealth Group?
So two things, I think. After the car accident, after starting my journey, I spent a period of time back in employment while we tried to kind of steady the ship, if you like. But having been out of that once already, two things happened. One was I kind of already made that decision that I couldn't really work for somebody else anymore. I needed the freedom to create and be in control. So I was looking for an opportunity to do that. And the second thing was that I really wanted to push and pursue my kind of speaking and coaching and my own personal development without the restrictions of time. So to be able to do that on my own terms. And I was looking for a vehicle to be able to do that. And what happened was two things happened again. I look at the period between 2008 and 2011, effectively, when we went through that difficult time. I also look at the period after that between kind of 2013 to 2015. And there was a period of things that happened in that 2 year period, or a number of things happened in that 2 year period that kind of worked almost in reverse. Because I was kind of now focusing on what I really wanted to do, what my life, how I'd envisioned my life should be, and trying to understand those aspects, things started to happen. I was connecting with other people. At the time I was working for a company, and I'd made the decision that I was going to leave. And I wasn't sure at the time how that was going to look. I just decided I really need to be working for myself. So I'd made the decision that that's what I was going to do. I drafted an email up to my current boss at the time, my current manager, to say, look, these are my thoughts, and I'm contemplating kind of handing my notice in and going my own. And I drafted it, hung on to it for a day or so, with the nerves of, what will happen if I send it. And then I'd spent a session with my own coach, and I talked through what I was thinking. We talked about, why did you want to do it? What was the driving force for it? And I made a decision that's what I was going to do. And I sent the email. And the day after that, he emailed me back saying, yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks for letting me know. We're sorry to lose you. If you ever decide to do any work as a consultant on a freelance basis, let me know. We'd love to continue working with you. And that was like, okay, so I now have a potential client anyway. On consultancy, which would free up some of my time. And so for a period of time, that's what I did. For 2 or 3 years, I worked as a consultant for a number of companies, both in the UK and overseas. But it allowed me the time to kind of focus and develop some of the the aspects around my coaching and speaking business that I wanted to push more into. So that was what led me to that program, and that's why the name at the time didn't reflect the business we were in, because it was never really, it was just a vehicle. We wanted it to be generic enough that it would support whatever we wanted to in the future. That's really what it was about.
Yeah, because your program now is called Total Resilience, correct?
Yeah, so I have a number of programs. So I have the Total Resilience program is a module which sits inside a program called the Dream Success Blueprint. Oh. And so that's kind of one of the modules. It's also for a while it's been available for people to download for free as part of some of the work that we've been doing. And that module in itself was born out of my experience of that period of time, in terms of, the resilience required to keep focused on where you're going, even though the circumstances don't seem to reflect what it is that you want, and how to see that differently.
So you do motivational speaking. When did you start doing that?
So again, I didn't ever have a direct ambition to be a speaker. I never set out at any point to say, that's what I want to do. I've been hugely inspired by speakers when I've seen them. So I've always attended events and thought, they were phenomenal. It's amazing how somebody in a short space of time can be speaking to maybe 1,000 people or 2,000 or 10,000, but it feels like they're talking to you about something. And so the ability to connect, I absolutely loved that. I thought it was phenomenal, but I didn't ever say, okay, I'd like to be a speaker. But what happened was I started to get asked, as I started to share my story and make changes in my life, people started to ask me what I was doing, how had I managed to do that, how did I achieve some of the things that I'd achieved. And so I started to tell them, and then it almost snowballed. People said, well, would you come to, our business event, or would you come here and would you share that story with them? I think they would have value. I got asked to speak in some schools and share some stuff around, how you can use education, but also how it's not the only outcome in towards success. How there's many other facets, and how to use some of the things that I've learned in business for students in terms of preparing for exams and preparing for their future. And it kind of just snowballed from there. And then I started to get asked to speak at other events, and then somebody asked me to speak on a podcast, and then it just kind of snowballed. And I thoroughly enjoy the opportunity to share both my story and add some value to people, that it just became, I absolutely love doing this. This is amazing. And so I then started to develop it more, started to look for more opportunities, reach out to people to try and get more opportunities to do that. And it's a part of what I do that I absolutely love doing. And it's one of those, people often say, if you did something for free for the rest of your life and enjoy it, would you do it for free? Speaking is something I thoroughly enjoy doing. I would go anywhere to speak to, whether it was one person or 1,000 people. So it's something that's transitioned, and I've found a passion for it, but it wasn't an intentional thing I set out to do a number of years ago.
Well, it's quite a compliment, and you definitely are a motivational speaker. You definitely can get people thinking, and sharing your story is so nice, especially for the men who are listening, who don't have the willpower yet to share their story.
Yeah, and I talk lots about this idea that, well, there's two things that I think. One is that people often ask me, when did I discover my purpose, or when will they discover theirs? And I genuinely say that I didn't discover it. I didn't search for it. It found me. I believe purpose claims you. I think it kind of reaches out and says, this is what you should be doing. And that's certainly what happened in terms of speaking and coaching, was that it just claimed me. It just said, you should be doing this. You helped this person. How does that? They felt amazing. It made me feel amazing. And I was like, well, this is how I should be spending my life. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I believe everybody has a story that can inspire somebody else. People trivialize their stories and their journeys. I was working with somebody recently who said, but I don't really have, you've got this amazing story about how you've overcome these difficulties and gone on to do something else. I don't really have that. And yet when we broke down some of the aspects of their life, they had like these amazing transformations. And I was like, well, if you shared that, what if only one person in the world said, I really needed to hear that right now because that's allowed me to be able to go and make a change in my life? Then it was worth doing.
No, everything you just said is completely true. I honestly believe that what you're meant to do finds you. You don't
Yeah.
find it. Whenever I listen to somebody speak, like myself, I was a nurse and now I do what I do with helping small businesses. It finds you. You don't find it. So yeah, I totally, and yeah, everybody does have a story and nobody knows who their story is going to touch.
No, for sure. And that's why, that's why I do what I do, is that there's no way that I can know who I'm supposed to talk to at any given time. But there are people out there who need to hear what we have to say in order for it to have an impact on them.
Yeah. So do you ever get any criticism for sharing your stories?
Um, I don't think I've had anything specific. But social media being what it is, not everybody agrees with everything that I say, and people are entitled to their own opinions about, what they believe. So, I've had comments from people, as most of us has, I think, who, particularly anybody, I think, who isn't following what everyone perceives to be the normal course of life and the way that everything should work. Anyone who says something slightly different or speaks out in a certain way, I think is open to some level of criticism from people who don't see it that way, and that's fine. Not everybody is part of my tribe, and they're not meant to be.
No, definitely. So I know with everything you've gone through, and now that we're going through COVID, how has that changed your business, and how are things in the UK right now?
So in terms of my business, we've had to make some changes. We used to do some live events, some live workshops, in-person workshops. We're not able to do those, so we've had to shift and run some of those online. But most of my coaching was delivered through technology like this anyway, because I had clients all over the world. So that hasn't changed significantly. The other thing that I talk about during COVID, and I'll come back to this, is that in 2008, when the global financial crisis happened, all I could see were obstacles. I could only ever see the difficulties that we were going through, all of the challenges that we had. I didn't see any opportunities in that time to make any changes or do anything. And yet, looking back, there were businesses that were launched during that financial crisis that are now billion-dollar brands. Companies like Uber, and they were all launched in that difficult period. And so the period was the same. It was the same time. Everyone was experiencing the same things. Yet some people saw an opportunity, and others, like me at the time, saw an obstacle. And so right now, there are people who are seeing this as a difficult time, as an obstacle, and there are some circumstances out there which appear to be making to confirm that it's a difficult time for people. But as an example, I started at the beginning of March this year. I'd made a commitment to myself, and as part of our plan for the business, that I would speak at more events, and I would reach out to more people and speak on different stages. And in March, that was not possible at all. And yet, during the last 16 weeks, I've probably spoke at more virtual events all over the world than I did in 2019 as a whole, just in 16 weeks. So again, people will see that as a difficulty, as an obstacle, or there's a huge opportunity. And it depends on our perspective. It depends what we talk about, how we look at things. And so in the current circumstance, one of the things that I've been talking a lot about is this idea that, if you imagine a 110-meter Olympic hurdler on the start line, when he looks up, all he sees are these hurdles in his way, obstacles. But the question he has to ask himself is, are these hurdles in my way, or are they on the way to where I want to be? And his view, obviously, is they're on the way. They're just a part of his journey from the start line to the finish line. The problem is when we see things like that, most of us see it just as a series of obstacles, and they're in the way. And so I've talked a lot about this idea that Jim Rohn, who is someone I think is was a phenomenal speaker in his time, and he often talked about the same wind blows on us all. It's not the blowing of the wind that determines the destination, the arrival, the point of arrival. It's the set of the sail. And so I use that a lot on the basis that in the current circumstances, we're all experiencing, this is a global pandemic, we're all experiencing the same conditions across the world. Yet some people are seeing huge opportunities in the current situation, and many are seeing huge obstacles. That's just a choice. That's down to us to decide whether or not we see opportunities or obstacles. And when we make that shift and say, I think this is a real time for opportunities, you come across more opportunities.
So is there any advice you can give to those who are seeing only obstacles?
Yeah, there's a saying that I talk about when I'm coaching clients, which is that when you're in the picture, it's really difficult to see the frame. And so whether I'm coaching someone directly or I'm giving advice, I always talk about this idea of stepping back out of the situation and looking at the perspective, trying to see the bigger picture, not just the bit that you're in right now. So it doesn't matter what business you're in. There's a by adding one word to a question, you can completely change the way the question looks. So most people ask themselves, can I do this? If you add the word how, the presumption is that you already can, you're just not sure how yet. So if you start asking, how can I do this? You'll start to see opportunities to solve it, solutions for the problem. If all you ask is, can I do it? All you're going to ever see is obstacles, things that are stopping you or preventing you from doing it. So for me, it's always about changing the shift in perspective, looking at things differently. When we change the way we look at things, what we look at changes. The number of times, I've run events, both virtual events and live events prior to COVID, where we would put things on the screen and ask people what they saw. And they would say all sorts of things, the different aspects, just based on perspective. And if that's the case with just images, then that's the case with everything. Our reality is perception-based. And so if people are seeing obstacles right now, then they're going to see more of those obstacles unless they change their perspective to start to say, okay, where are the opportunities? How can I change what we see right now and start to see opportunities around what we're doing? How can we change our business? How can we pivot? I'm not a big fan of the word pivot, but it's kind of become a synonym right now. But how can we take what we do and how do we see the current situation as an obstacle, or is it an opportunity to reach more people? Anybody who, particularly in our environment, speakers, coaches, business services, experts, etc., it's a massive opportunity to reach more and more people across the world, because all of those businesses are now looking to change the way they work. They're all looking to work remotely or to change, and they're looking to outsource things. They're looking for people to support them in different ways. There's huge opportunities for people, but you're only ever going to see them if you start looking for them.
So when you're coaching people and they're becoming successful and doing their stuff, do you remind them that they have to go back to the start just to kind of stay on that same path? Or do you get them to check in with their mindset?
Yeah, part of our program, there's two aspects to it. So, that when I work with people, I'm looking to make the biggest changes, the biggest transformation in the shortest possible time. I want to see them have huge impacts in their life and business. Beyond that point, I talk about it in reverse. People talk about expanding comfort zones. I talk about peeling away the layers of an onion. My job is not to change people. I don't ever change anybody. What we do is reveal who they really are. And it's about peeling away these things to reveal who it is. And so what happens over a period of time when people work with somebody like myself is you peel away some layers and then they discover something else that was hidden away in one of those levels, in one of those layers, in one of those cores that says, I never realized that about myself. That's now come up. I need to understand and deal with this. And so when I'm working with people on a longer term basis, that's usually what's happening. They're having success, and then they suddenly realize that now I've got to here. I've discovered this about myself, or I've realized this, and that's now stopping me going to the next level, or it's concerning me in some way. And then we'll look at that and work on that from that perspective.
So you've already shared who inspires you. Why don't you tell us what's one thing you would like to see in the world?
For me, I think that's really easy for me, is that if I could change one thing, it was that people could understand who they really were, on this idea that they already have everything they ever needed to be doing and have everything they ever wanted, provided they're willing to give up the belief that it's not possible. And so if I could help people just change that one thing, that for a few moments, they could see themselves the way that they were intended to see themselves, with all of this unlimited potential and power that they have, because they would never again go back. It's one of those things when if you read something in a book sometimes, or you see something in a movie, you can't unsee it, you can't unread it or unlearn it. Once it's there, it's like, wow. I think if we could get people to that point, they'd never be able to go back. They would always want to experience their potential and power and have their impact in the world.
Well, I think you've definitely inspired a lot of us here today. Where can our listeners find out more about you?
So they can get me on my website, which is deanafox.com, and they can reach me on most of the social channels. So on Facebook and Instagram, I'm at Dean Fox Coaching, is my business, or they can find me personally on the social platforms. I'm also on LinkedIn as well.
Nice. Well, thank you for coming on today with us.
It's been a pleasure. I'm genuinely grateful to anybody who provides a platform or an opportunity where we can hopefully share some value and impact somebody somewhere who may need what we're talking about right now.
No, so true. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Raise the Anchor, brought to you by Killick Media. Remember, you can join our email list at killickmedia.com and subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss the next episode. Don't forget to rate this episode as well. I'm Melissa Burbridge, wishing you smooth sailing.